Great. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Tim. Great to have you here. I'm JT, CEO of Coresystems, and I'll be hosting this podcast today. Maybe to get started, Tim, great again to have you on board. Thanks a lot for doing this with us. Maybe we could start out with getting a brief introduction of you, kind of your background, the roles you've held, and anything else you might want to tell us.
Sure. Yeah. So I kind of got into the ATM business roughly about 23 years ago. Started as a technician, kind of jumped around from a place called Wilson Group. Worked at Diebold when it was just Diebold. Then worked over at Hyosung as a technician. Kind of cut my teeth doing that for about 10 or 11 years. Then I got into management at Hyosung. Did front end management, middle management, all the way up to I left that organization as the vice president of service. Did that for about 3 years, and then kind of landed over at Cornelius Systems, where I'm at right now. The commonality in all those is we deal with banking equipment, ATMs, cash recyclers. So kind of been doing that for the last 23 years. From the very bottom all the way to the top and kind of in between.
That's great. So 23 years of in-depth service experience, servicing critical equipment, very technical and critical equipment. So super to have you on board for this year. Super. I'm really looking forward to hear your perspective.
Sure.
And some of the stuff we discussed up front, you mentioned that during the pandemic, but also in general, during your career, you had different events that kind of reshaped the perspective you had on leadership. Let's dive into that.
Yeah. I'll kind of walk you through. So as a technician, you're kind of on the front line. So that's kind of where my perspective started, right? And as a technician, it's a difficult job when you're going out there and you're kind of up against it, and you're tasked with getting that machine back up. I had good managers, okay managers, and really great leaders. And that was one thing that really shaped me, as a young individual kind of going through. And so I kind of took all those leaders and said, I want to be this leader. You take some of the negatives and you say, I don't want to do that. You take the positive and say, hey, I want to be like this guy. And so I took a lot of those, and that's kind of what shaped me. So when I did get the opportunity to be in a leadership role, I kind of took all those experiences and put them into action at that time. Now, during the pandemic, as we all know, I mean, all of us, on this call or who are involved in service, very challenging time. A different challenge when you are leading technicians that are out there. And you don't know what the next day is going to bring. I mean, when we first got news of the pandemic, I mean, there was all kinds of, scary things going around there. I didn't know how it was spread. We still had a business to run. So really, that shaped us in just kind of formulating how are we going to attack each day, right? I mean, we were so used to just things flowing very easy and no issues. And you really had to attack each day and change the way you were kind of delivering to your customers, and not only your customers, but now you're having to look out, definitely for your employees, their health, their safety. So it really shaped me. I mean, it's almost like we had to rebuild our service organization during that time.
Can we kind of get a little bit deeper into that? Like you mentioned, rebuild your service organization during that time. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So obviously, customers, when you're in the banking world, it's a lot of KPIs, right? They're really focused on that response time, getting that equipment back up. You had several people that were affected health-wise, right? Especially in the technician community, that weren't available to deliver to customers. So kind of keeping that open line of communication with our customers during that time, kind of dealing with those challenges as they came, and really just reshaping how we attacked, service on a day-to-day basis because of those challenges. Staffing was difficult at that time. I think a lot of organizations like ours, dealt with attrition at that time. So kind of attacking that and really listening to the employees out there on the front lines and kind of shaping our organization on how we wanted to react based off of that.
So listening in a period of time when it was actually difficult to have face-to-face conversations, right?
Yes. Communication, I always have felt like communication is really important. I mean, it was so important during that time, right? It was a lot. You're right. A lot of people were afraid of that face-to-face interaction. So it was a lot of phone calls or video conferences. It was a very, very strange time. But it was critical to have that line of communication, whether it was with your employees, whether it was with leadership, within the organization, and more importantly, with the customers to kind of explain what was going on, how we were adjusting, how we were going to continue to take care of them. To your point, it was critical.
Yeah, that makes sense. When after the pandemic, there's a lot of habits that we kind of kept. I mean, the fact that we're talking on a video screen right now is probably something that's been brought along by the pandemic, or at least that's something that makes it feel so natural and so day to day, even today, long time after the pandemic. So, of the practices you've learned during that time as a leader, what are things that you're still doing today that you kind of brought with you out of the pandemic?
It was kind of, you think you have a really good organization, right? And we did over at Hyosung. I mean, we really valued the service end of it and kind of taking care of our employees. But nobody was prepared for the pandemic, right? So it kind of taught you, putting in processes and procedures not only to safeguard the organization, but safeguard the employees. What happens if this scenario happens, right? How are we going to react? And kind of thinking a little more forward than we were at that time, right? So continuing, honestly, after that, we really started to put a lot of process and procedure, like what if this scenario happens? How are we as an organization going to handle this, not only from an internal aspect, but external to our customers. So we put in a lot of process and procedure. And if you go to Hyosung today, those things are still active. So I tried to bring that perspective, when I came over here to Cornelius, to try and look a little bit more forward and prepare for what we don't want to deal with, but at least have a plan when it does occur.
Mm-hmm. So kind of preparing, having kind of a playbook in place for things that could happen.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Things that you wouldn't have done prior to the pandemic. You wanted to, right? But it wasn't always the most important aspect. So I think it became a little bit more important, kind of woke everybody up in that aspect.
Yeah. These things that you always keep dragging with you. I hear you. One of the things you mentioned earlier in the conversation is that early on in your career, you kind of, observed leadership behaviors of the different people, of the different managers you had. Something I can super relate to. Kind of the same here. And then applying them, sometimes even situation specifically. Like now I'm more like this one. I'm more like him or her. What can you expand maybe a little bit on your own philosophy or the philosophy you've built really of being a hands-on leader, and especially also why the human-to-human interaction is so important to you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it really, I had I'll mention the good leader's name, and I'll kind of not mention the ones that weren't, right? So I had my second stop as a technician was at Diebold. And I had probably the best leader and a guy that I took so many principles from. His name was Michael Berryman. And, the prior place, you would always get the phone call when you did something wrong, right? So you're like, oh boy, my manager's calling me. I must have done something wrong. But he would just pick up the phone and say, hey, how's it going, Tim? How's your family? I just want to check in on you. That made such an impression on me. I'm like, wow, this guy cares enough where, he's not calling me because, there's an escalation or I might have handled something incorrectly. He's just calling to check on me. So that probably made the biggest impression on me as I was, growing into the business. And I said, you know what, I want to be that guy where I could just call up my employees and just find out how things are going, right? Just check in on them. So I still do that to this day. Another leader that I had over at Hyosung, his name was Tony Mano, great mentor, great leader. One of the things, he made a very good impression on me. He said, hey, don't ever lose, wearing that technician hat. Remember, what you went through and kind of how you looked at leadership and kind of truncate that down, right? So those were probably the two biggest impressions. And then, kind of on a negative side, you always take that leader that kind of doesn't handle things very well or called you only when you did something wrong or just had that negative approach. I didn't want to be that guy. You can hold people accountable, but you can do it in a very positive way. So I always try to take that, no matter who I'm talking to. Everybody has a different personality. Getting to know your employees is so important. What motivates them? Those are really, I'm very passionate about that.
Absolutely, yeah. I think our industries are very similar in that regards. Like people are the biggest asset we have, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I firmly believe that, and I owe it to those two individuals to really make that impression on me. And those are probably the two that form me and my philosophy the most.
That makes sense. That resonates. Great. Shifting gears a little bit, we're getting into an age. We've been getting into this age probably for the last 20 years, but where customer self-service is more and more becoming the norm. We also have things like remote service where you dial in, video log in, and help the customer remotely. So if we shift from like the employee relationship and especially the hands-on and human-to-human interaction in the colleague employee type of relationship and translate that to the customer, what does this increase in self-service mean for the human connection and for the interactions on the service side of things? Like, what's your perspective on that?
I got a good one. So here at Cornelius Systems, we use with our ATMs, we use a product called Managed Services, right? It's kind of right up what you're saying. It does a lot of remote functions. It can reboot the ATM remotely. It can tell you fault codes that are happening quicker than the customer, reporting it to the bank and the bank calling you. So it's all great, right? It can do, hot fixes software-wise. It does all these nice things. Now, if you don't explain that to the customer, then they don't really understand that product through and through. So I think that communication line, I've found where customers don't know even what it does, and really educating them. And they're like, wow, this is great. I wish I would have known about this, a couple of years ago or, a couple of months ago. And so really getting them to understand a product. It's also, so I like where technology is taking us, but I think you have to educate everybody. Hey, what does this product do? How is it beneficial to you? And then, really explaining, how it works, how it benefits them. I think that's the key element of communication there. Sometimes we get lost in that, right? We'll say, hey, it is a great product. It does this, this, and this. And then the communication stops. So I've found that it's really important to continue that communication, make sure they understand how the product works. And so I think you can marry the two, right? You marry the technology with the communication, and it really has worked out well with me, with customers, when I've had that interaction.
So really bringing kind of the tools that you're starting to use into the conversation, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's been really good for me because I've learned the product, right? So I've educated myself on the product. Then I can educate the customer on how is this going to make your life easier
Yeah.
And then as we're going through it, there's that learning curve, right? Well, why doesn't it do this? Well, here's why. A, B, and C, and D, it does this, right? So it's just really that constant communication and making sure they're comfortable with the technology. Sometimes people get a little bit intimidated by technology. I'll be, I'm in the middle of the road there. So once I understood it, I love it. I'm a big proponent of it.
That's super good input, especially also from my perspective. Coming from Coresystems, where what we do is basically putting AI into the hands of customer service
Right.
employees,
Yeah.
from the guys who are in the service center to the guys who go out into the field, and also in the service space. And so, this I see AI fundamentally changing service, but it's super important to kind of bring the human along there, right? And so we have these chatbots that solve issues, end to end and completely remotely without humans in the loop, which is fine. But then, as soon as you get into the service center, you have pre-written emails. That's kind of the tool that the tool gives you. We now even guide we guide the service staff through the conversations by listening into the conversation with AI and popping up the right things and helping them ask the next best question, etc., etc., right, up to the technician who gets also helped. And I'd like to get your view on that. Like, is this, in your view, diluting the human element, or and obviously it's a bit more my philosophy, are we through that allowing people to free up more time so that they can actually focus on really connecting with the customer, really also spending more time on the stuff they like to do, which is usually fixing stuff, and having less admin, less research time spent somewhere else, which is actually taking them also away from the conversation and from the human to human interaction. What's your view there?
I probably have a strong opinion here, probably much like yourself. I think it does dilute it a little bit. When you go on forums like ChatGTP, I mean, the stuff it can do is amazing, right? I mean, it can write something that might take you an hour or two, and it's done like that, right? But I tend to think it dilutes it because it takes the human element out of it. I'm not. You may call me old school. I don't think I'm old school there. But I'm not a huge fan of it. I think to some degree it can be helpful, right? I mean, it can pull up information. I've used it, and it can pull up information very quickly for you. But in terms of like communication, I just feel like if it's coming from you, the individual, it's probably far more impactful from the customer. And honestly, if I've got to do the research, right, and I'm putting that together, I can speak to it a little bit more comfortably than, oh gosh, what did ChatGTP write for me, or whatever AI format I'm using. So I tend to agree with you on that one.
Great. So it's kind of like it's almost like you have to find the middle way, like so often,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
You need to focus on making the conversation better, and probably freeing up the admin time, or the time that we don't like spending on writing reports and things like that, but helping also get better understanding why you have the conversation with the customer, so that you can really focus on that interaction. Does that summarize it?
Yeah, I think just like we talked about with the technology piece, the question before, I think it's a happy medium of kind of marrying the two, right? Proper human communication while using that AI tool to kind of make your life easier. I'm not saying it's a bad thing by any stretch, because again, I'll raise my hand. I've used it, right, and it has saved me time. But I don't want it to direct the whole conversation, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah, great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that advice. That was also super nice for me to hear. Maybe to kind of wrap things up, and also we probably have a lot of other leaders here listening. What kind of advice would you give to them if they're struggling to create this human to human interaction?
For me, it's all about really listening, right? I've learned. I thought I was a good listener when when I first started, but you go through all these different experiences, right? Whether it's prior to the pandemic, to post-pandemic, to even now, right? I'm learning things now, how to listen to people. So I think it's really just listening to each individual and what they're saying. And that's easy to say, but what you take from listening to individuals and then kind of actioning that builds that trust within your organization, right? If I sit there and say, yes, I'm going to do this after, we're in a meeting, or if I'm with my employees and I don't action that, I don't take that to heart, I think you lose a little bit of credibility along the way. So I'm a big proponent of listening, taking that listening skill and actioning it, putting something forward for the organization, whether it's external, internal, customer, employees. It's so important, right? Just to really listen. And I think if you listen, that communication comes organically. It really does. If you listen properly, it just gives you kind of what you need to, build out a process or action an item. So that would be my best advice. It served me well. And then, kind of retrospectively, having good leaders, like I mentioned, Tony, kind of reminding me, hey, remember when you were a technician, right?
Yeah.
What did those guys and gals go through on a daily basis? And kind of putting yourself back in that perspective. Yeah. It's a strong tool when you're able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So listening, reflecting from the other person's perspective, and then kind of walk the talk, put it in the back.
Yeah. And then taking some action to kind of push forward what's going to best fit, whether it's the employee, the organization, anything you do. That listening is really the first step.
Great, Tim. That's been really, really insightful. Thanks a lot for joining us here. Yeah. Any last words from your side?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, and I really love what I'm doing, and I'm very passionate about people and communication. So I appreciate this was a great forum, and just appreciate you guys having me on as well.
Great, thank you so much, Tim, and thanks to all our listeners. Really glad to have you all here. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.